Thank you. Thank you very much to my good friend Ada for inviting me to this conference. It's fantastic to see you guys. Ada, I was talking to Ada about what to talk to you guys about, and we were batting around some ideas, and I said, how about if I tell you guys where everyone in Europe is screwing up, so you can beat them? How about that? Anyway, I'm Mike. I'm the editor of TechCrunch Europe. It's a network site, part of TechCrunch.com. I work with Mike Arrington and all of the team over in San Francisco and New York. But I write specifically about European startups. And I'm here today to talk to you guys and to talk to the Turkish startup scene and anyone involved. How many people here are in a startup? Put your hand up. A few people, cool. How many people here are in part of a big corporate company? Yeah? Cool. Well, you guys need to network with each other, because that's important for the community. I'm on Twitter. You guys are more friend feed users, aren't you? Is that right? Yeah? More friend feed? And Facebook, right? But anyway, that's me on Twitter. My details are up in another slide. I'm just going to rattle through these. I've got a big warning. I'm really bad at PowerPoint, sorry. So not tons of photos. I put a few photos in. But I'm going to go through some of the ideas that we've got going on. I think that European startups can really improve. And a lot of this is going to sound kind of negative, but it's not supposed to be negative. It's more like trying to help everybody to stop making mistakes when they're doing startups. So everybody gets better, huh? So here's what I think can happen. These are just generalizations. This is sort of like the worst of the worst. So all these people are making these really dumb mistakes, and they can stop making them if we tell them about it. So don't take it personally. This has got nothing to do with Turkey. This is just everything I've learnt going around Europe talking to startups. So here's a big picture, startup.com. We're ready, right? So let's talk about money. This is a big issue in startups because you're talking about high growth companies that are trying to grow quickly. And usually what that means is they don't just run on revenues, they tend to run on investment. That's the difference that's happened recently has been the rise of the Groupon clones, the private shopping clones, like I think in Turkey, Makafone is one of the bigger ones. So these companies are much more e-commerce driven. They can run on revenues. But lots of technology startups run just on thin air for a long time until they get scale, which is why VC becomes important. So I think just rattling through some of these points, I think you can confuse venture capital with startups. It is possible to do a startup without VC, without angel. Perhaps you can get a loan or friends and family round. And actually there's not a lot of money required these days to actually do a startup. You can actually get going quite easily. There's a lot of free tools on the internet, and you can make use of social networking to promote your product. And other things like other kind of free kinds of resources. So that's important to say that. And I think also you can get too bogged down in searching for money, searching for investment. And I know that in Europe it's very hard to find investment. Often there is very few business angels, very few VCs. You have to search hard and long to find investors. And you can spend a lot of time on that. Maybe you should just concentrate on your product and concentrate on your users. I think there's a lot of, in Europe I find there's a lot of kind of abuse by angels of startups. And I'm not talking about the good angels, I'm talking about like the bad, the evil angels who take too much equity in startups. And I think that entrepreneurs need to be powerful. They need to realize that they can be strong and powerful, and actually these are the guys, the startups, the entrepreneurs, they are the ones that drive the ecosystem. okay? You need to realize that you have a position of strength, and you need to make that work for you. And that means that you also need to fight other investors and get competitive term sheets. Don't just go to one VC or one angel. Go to several. Get out of Turkey. Go to Germany and France and the UK. Go to get on a cheap flight. Just go and do some meetings. Find other people who are going to compete to invest in your company, okay? Because there's a lot going on right now, and a lot of these guys, they want to get out and they want to make investments. A lot of cash has been kept bundled up during the recession, and there are a lot of funds out there that need to make investments. So think big. So I would say also, it's also you need to pick investors. Startups in Europe sometimes pick investors just on money rather than experience or sense or smarts. You really want an investor who's smart, who's got great experience, and who's got a great network, and who's going to actually network you through other investors, through potential partners, maybe media partners, corporate partners, whoever. And it's not just about valuation, it's about what you can do with these people. So, and I think also, you need to, are you actually a startup that is going to produce 10 times the investment put into you? That's a lot, okay? So if you are not that kind of company, then don't look for investment. People make this mistake all the time. They think that they are going to be the next Twitter or the next Google, when, maybe they're much more of a featured kind of company. They're maybe still valid, but they're not really investable. So you need to work out, are you the kind of company that a VC is really interested in, or an angel? Because if you're not, then why take the money, And I think bootstrapping is really underrated. And if you can build a business based on cash flow, then you don't need to take an investment, and you don't need to give part of the company away. You need to have a plan B. If you don't get investment, what are you going to do, okay? So think about that. A lot of the problems with Europe is people think about, I'm going to do a company and I'm going to sell it. Don't think about that. Think about the product. Put some value in there. Make the product work. It's much better to do that because then you'll end up with a better product, and maybe then you might exit, okay? Rather than just thinking about the end game. I think there's kind of a gold rush mentality that actually produces a lot of bad products, and none of these products ever actually end up going anywhere. So think about those things. And I think you need to go after users. You need to go after traction rather than thinking about, your swimming pool or your fast car that you're going to buy with the big exit, when, that's a long way away. And I think also getting experienced people on board is important. Give them equity. Share the equity with your team. It's not just about the founders. It's also about spreading the love so that all of those guys can benefit, and then they can become entrepreneurs in their own right. And then the rising tide lifts all boats, and you all become entrepreneurs. Your whole ecosystem improves. So let's talk about product. Who's seen this movie? Hands up. Good, huh? It's complete rubbish. It's based on a book that didn't have a lot of the actual reality, a lot of the truth. But it's a good movie. It's a really good movie. So product, offering too many features of services. Just concentrate on the features that people will use. You've got to talk about, product is important, so important in startups, crazy important. Your CEO needs to be obsessed by product. If your CEO, if the founder is not obsessed by product, then what are they doing, right? And I think it's important. Engineers are fantastic. I love engineers. I love developers. But they're not necessarily product people. Product people solve problems. They make sure that the startup is solving the problem in the marketplace. Does this product solve this problem? When will it solve this problem? Which market is it addressing? These are the things that engineers don't necessarily think about. And I think in clones, you can talk about clones. We can talk about, there's lots of clones in Europe of US startups. And okay, fair enough. Some clones will make money, some don't. But just doing a clone for a clone's sake is not really a strategy. User experience is also important in product. I mean, Twitter is the most simplest thing ever, and yet look at the amount of engagement it has. Friend feed, incredibly simple, huge amounts of engagement. Facebook started off simple, now it's very complicated. And I think taking too long, right? Everybody sometimes just takes way too long. I'm going to mention a couple of startups later on about companies that just take too long getting out there. It's much better to get something out there, get users hitting it, finding out if it works, than spending a long time creating something that might not work. This is another point on this. Version and release is an old model. It's much more about iteration. It's launch, iterate, 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 iterate. It's not about spending, months and months on something and then launching. And don't use, using agencies to build your product is not a startup way. You don't do it in the Valley. Some startups in Europe do it, and it's odd. This is Kevin Rose. Kevin Rose, co-founder of Dig. This guy is a big party animal, does a lot of parties like Diggnation. He does a show called Diggnation. And Diggnation Live, fantastic. If you ever go to it, it's in America, or if you ever go, I mean, he's done some in London as well, which are really fun. But they're really about networking the community together. And I think entrepreneurs naturally need to network because they need to bounce ideas off each other, so to make sure they're going in the right direction. And so get out there. And this is exactly what Brassy Summit is all about. It's what Le Web in Paris, it's what Geek and Roller in London that I run is about. It's about getting people together, mashing things up. And it's about sharing information. And also, I think, not just networking with other startups and other companies in your space, but also the other companies who might, potentially become acquirers of your company. It's important. And I think also borders. I want to invite everyone here to London. I want to introduce you to London, and London to get to know you guys as well, because in Europe, we need to get out there a lot more. We're all sitting in our own silos in our own countries, and I want to G everybody up and get everybody getting out there, going to lots of conferences and events and meeting other entrepreneurs in other countries in Europe. Makes sense. And I think also you need to have vision. Don't worry about failure. You just need to plow on through to the vision. And I think it's about building something that you really believe in. You need to be bold. And, there's an interesting case called Jaiku, which was a Finnish company from Helsinki, which had a very Twitter-like startup, basically almost predated Twitter. And yet they sold within a year to Google for about $15 million, which, okay, sounds like a good exit, except for the fact that Twitter is now worth possibly $1 billion. So if they'd kept going, they might have actually become a really big startup. So I think selling early and not having enough, being bold and going for it, I think it's worth really thinking about that and doing it. Read blogs, read the International Startup, where Brassy has an international edition, I know, which is fantastic. What you want to know is you want to know exactly how people are thinking all the time. Don't get left behind. And I think also riding big trends. Playfish was a startup based out of London, but I mean, frankly, all of them were international people anyway. There was Finns and Swedes and Europeans from all over in that company, but they sold to EA for, I think it was $260 million. But they got out onto the Facebook platform early and created great games. I think you can miss these trends if you don't, if you don't catch them. So look at those big trends. Lean startups. Everyone, check out this website, Startup Lessons Learned, or Google Lean Startups. This is a fantastic philosophy for building really iterative, powerful, fast-moving companies. Read about it. I really recommend it. It's a great movement. Don't bet against the browser. I think it's really tough. Look at Juiced. Tried to bet against the browser and have ultimately failed. Everything's gone Flash and web video, and then now increasingly HTML5. And I think also pivoting. If you Google startups and pivoting, that's an important issue as well. Pivoting is about changing direction quickly. And startups need to think very much more about not just getting in one mode, but also moving quickly and changing strategy as the mood takes them and as the market requires. Good tattoo, huh? You need to have dedication and passion if you're going to be in a startup. Your team needs to be on board. And so you need to build a team of kick-ass people, not just your friends. And anyway, source anywhere really around in your time zone, I guess, professional, preferably. But co-locating, getting your team together in one space is ideal. But if you find a fantastic coder somewhere else, use them. And if you can work with them, great. It's all about working with people you trust, and also it's also about working hard, really hard. The reason that Silicon Valley is as successful as it is because people work all the time. It's amazing, and they literally work all the time. And now it's not a great lifestyle. They don't exercise enough, maybe. They're working literally all the time, round the clock. But it makes their ecosystem very, very powerful. And if you want to be a real startup, you've got to play at that level. But this is all sort of negative. Let's look at the positive side, okay? Here are the advantages. We've got great talent. We've got awesome coders, engineers. We've got great events to come to. We've got increasingly, I notice in Europe, loads and loads of more events and places where people can co-work and things like that. It's fantastic. And we've got great global media brands. Europe is fantastic for fashion, for media. All of these are going to be great sources of startup energy over the next few years. Lots more VC now, increasingly gathered around London, Berlin, etc., and Israel. Much more exits now in the last couple of years. There's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions, I think, over the next 6 months in Europe. And lots more broadband. A big online advertising market. A huge explosion in mobile, which we're really good at in Europe. And a lot of these other kind of great things that are going on, open source. And I think lastly, I want to say, it's not about building a Silicon Valley where you live in Europe, because we're not going to be able to build a Silicon Valley. Come on, this is 50 years of history that they have. They have the Manhattan Project, the development of the atomic bomb. They have the military-industrial complex, the cowboy Western attitude of go for it attitude. But we can get a lot of those stuff that they have, but it's hard to build that cluster. So we don't need to create a Silicon Valley where we live. What we need to do is we need to create bridges between each other in Europe. And that is going to become a powerful network for startups. And I just lastly wanted to say something about what I said earlier about getting you guys over to London if you're ever there, is I really want to invite you out to a project that I'm involved in called Tech Hub, which is 5,000 square feet of space. It's like about as big as this. And it's where people are meeting from across Europe to build companies and build startups, entrepreneurs, developers, VCs. We're holding, this is in this cluster in Europe, in London. They're calling it Silicon Roundabout. It's kind of fun. It's a joke. And we've got events, we've got space, meeting rooms, desks, and here's my co-founder, Elizabeth. And while I'm working on TechCrunch, in my spare time, I'm working with Tech Hub to help a lot of startups get going. It's not an investment, it's not a fund, it's just a space. And it's a membership space, so you can just join and become a member and turn up and hang out and meet people. And we have a great time. So thank you very much, everybody, and any questions? Would anybody like to ask questions, or do you want to know anything about TechCrunch or anything while I'm here before we move on? Put your hand up. You got it all?
How do you choose startups to write cover on TechCrunch?
Good question. Thank you very much, Ada.
The reason I asked was I just want to learn as well.
Yeah. I think what you've got to do when you're pitching a story to a blogger like Ada or to myself or to a journalist, basically, is to think about what is the story you're telling. Don't think of it in terms of PR terms. Think of it in terms of how can I help this journalist or this blogger do a story which is going to be really good. And you have to think outside of your company and think about what is the context in which your story is operating in. Yeah? So if you are building something which is going to be the next great Facebook game, for instance, you think, okay, what's the story? Well, who are the big Facebook games? Farmville, games like that. So what is the context? So are we going to beat Farmville? Are we going to compete against them? Are we like Farmville but different? All these contexts are good. And also I think a big tip is always mention your competition, because it helps the blogger actually work out who you are. Where do you fit in the context of the story? And there's lots of other ways of telling stories, like you're a 17-year-old kid with a great idea and your startup's gone crazy, like chat roulette, right? 17-year-old from Russia. Crazy. So that becomes a great story. I think there are other things like maybe there are other announcements you can make. Maybe you've got funding. Maybe you've hired somebody really important in the business. These are the kinds of things that you look for when you're writing about companies. And I think important, just lastly, just be a human being. Remember that journalists and bloggers are human beings as well. We get assaulted. I get 500 emails a day. So your email is going to get lost unless you say something that's significant. But also, be a human. If I talk to you later, don't kind of assault me. Just talk normally like anybody else would, because we're human beings too. But there you go. Thank you very much, Ada. And be our bird.
Thank you so much for being with us.